Mom? I turned around, startled by the voice, and saw a homeless person in tattered clothes. Unbelievably, it was my daughter who I thought had died. 6 months ago, my 16-year-old daughter had left for a study abroad program. But 2 weeks later, she supposedly died in an accident. I had been in a daze, shocked by the news. Finally, I had pulled myself together enough to visit her study abroad location. And there, I had this unexpected reunion. Overwhelmed with surprise and joy, I hugged my daughter while crying. However, what she told me was an unbelievable, shocking truth. My name is Ashley, and I'm 42 years old. I lived with my husband Daniel and our daughter Isabella. I was a full-time housewife, while Daniel worked as a salesman for a large trading company, traveling all over the world. Isabella was a sophomore in high school, studying hard to be recommended for a short-term study abroad program only available to one student in her grade. Isabella studying abroad? Staying in the country is good enough. Look at me. I'm successful without doing anything like that, Daniel said. But wouldn't experiencing a broader world overseas be a good experience? I replied. My husband frowned as soon as he heard me speak, disapproving of our daughter's plans. He had old-fashioned ideas and disliked women being active in society. In fact, I had quit my job to become a housewife when we got married because he strongly insisted on it. Besides, do you know how much it costs to study abroad? Airfare, tuition, living expenses. You're planning to pay for all of this with the money I earned, aren't you? I have no intention of wasting money like that. After hearing this from my husband, I was at a loss for words. Still, I continued trying to persuade him, desperate to make Isabella's dream come true. Then I'll earn the money for Isabella's study abroad. I'll work part-time and still take care of the house properly. I won't rely on your income. Is that all right? Please. Humph. A woman like you working part-time won't earn much. If you slack off on housework even a little, I'll make you quit right away. My husband sneered, but I had finally gotten his permission. From then on, I worked part-time every day, kept the house spotless, cooked perfect meals, and somehow managed to save up for our daughter's study abroad by cutting back on my own food expenses. Eventually, thanks to her efforts, Isabella was chosen as a member of the short-term study abroad program. Even my husband, albeit reluctantly, seemed to have come around to the idea of sending our daughter off. Mom, Dad, I'm off. And so our daughter left with a beaming smile and high spirits. However, tragedy struck suddenly. 2 weeks after our daughter had gone to France for her study abroad, my husband came home from work and rushed over to me with a pale face. Listen calmly. I just got a call from Isabella's school abroad. They said she died in an accident. The moment I heard those words, all strength left my body and my mind went blank. That can't be. It's a lie, right? I couldn't accept the reality and fainted from the shock. I ended up bedridden for several days due to poor health. For a while, I couldn't think about anything. It felt like I was in a dream. During that time, my husband left me behind and went to our daughter's study abroad location, but I was unable to even get up, so I was left behind. What happened to Isabella? I finally asked my husband about our daughter's situation when he returned home. However, his response was cold. "I took care of everything. The funeral was held there too." "What? You've already finished everything. What else could I do? You weren't in any state to handle it." The moment I heard my husband's words, I felt a hole open up in my heart, and at the same time, anger began to bubble up inside me. I couldn't be there for my daughter's final moments or say goodbye to her. Yet my husband didn't seem to care about my feelings, and he didn't even appear to be grieving. "You could have at least contacted me before the funeral." "Shut up. Stop lying around and do the housework. How can you talk like that? Isabella is dead now. Get rid of all her stuff." Since then, we stopped talking about our daughter. I couldn't understand how my husband could remain so calm. 6 months later, when I had finally started to come to terms with my feelings a little, I told my husband I was going on a trip with friends to refresh myself. Secretly, I headed to France. I wanted to lay flowers for my daughter at her study abroad location. "So this is the town where she spent her time," I thought as I walked through the streets, lost in nostalgia. That's when it happened. "Mom?" Surprised by the voice calling me, I turned around and saw a homeless person in tattered clothes. For a moment, I was confused, but then I looked closely at the dirty face and realized with a start. Isabella. The girl, terribly thin with messy hair and in a pitiful state, was undoubtedly my daughter. Surprise and tears welled up all at once, and my heart started pounding fiercely. "You're alive. In this state. What on earth happened? Mom, help me." Hearing her strained voice, I hugged her tightly. It was all his doing. Isabella, unable to even put strength into her body in my arms, started telling me something unbelievable. I could see deep hatred and despair in her eyes as she looked up at me. "It's okay. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. I'll protect you now." I felt an intense flame of anger I had never experienced before burning inside me. Later, after returning to our country, I began preparations to take revenge on the person who had hurt my daughter. I thought she wouldn't find peace unless the culprit received a punishment fitting the crime. 2 weeks later, I was sitting across from my husband at a restaurant. It was his birthday. The candlelight on the table flickered gently, creating a special atmosphere. "It's been a while since we've eaten out, just the two of us," he said. He had been in a good mood throughout the meal and let out a contented sigh after finishing dessert. "This is your birthday present. Open it," I said, handing him a large book. "Is this an album?" "Yes. I put together all our memories in one book." I smiled sweetly as my husband opened the album with great interest. "Did you make this? It's amazing. Oh. There are even photos from before we got married." My husband's voice was unusually excited as he continued turning the pages. "This is our wedding, and this is our honeymoon." His expression gradually softened as if recalling past memories. "Is this when Isabella was born?" "Huh." However, As soon as he looked at the next page, his expression clouded over. I didn't miss this change and inwardly smirked. What's wrong? My husband turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. No wonder, because with each turn of the page, intimate photos of him with his mistress appeared one after another. Pictures of him enjoying meals with women other than me, walking hand in hand. These were photos of his affairs that I had painstakingly collected from the day I returned from France until today. My husband was clearly averting his gaze, seemingly trying to think of an excuse. Why are these here? More importantly, who is this woman? This is just a colleague. It's some kind of misunderstanding. Oh, really? You look awfully close for just colleagues. I calmly refuted his words. We're involved in the same project, so we often end up together. Even at this time, I was just listening to her work troubles. My husband, still thinking he could get away with it at this point, kept making excuses. I suppose if it was a serious consultation, you'd need to be in a private room, right? I calmly turned to the next page, where there was a large photo of my husband and his mistress entering a hotel. The blood drained further from my husband's face, and his mouth trembled. You're wearing your wedding ring in the photo, aren't you? Doesn't this woman know you're married? As I stared straight at my husband and pressed him with an icy cold voice, he finally seemed to give up. With tears welling up in his eyes, he gripped my hand tightly. I'll confess. After Isabella died, I went crazy and had an affair. It was just a moment of weakness. Please believe me. Indeed, the photos pasted in the album were all from after our daughter had gone. You must have been in pain too, losing our daughter. That's right. It felt like I'd lost an arm, and I wanted to escape reality. Misunderstanding that I was showing understanding, he quickly tried to match my tone. I whispered, "Such lies," to my husband and quietly took out my smartphone. Then who do you think took this video? Seeing it, he stared at the screen for a while with an expression that seemed to say he couldn't believe it. This is a video of you with her in France, isn't it? Were you on a business trip together? You must have been busy to have a date during that time. My husband, who had been dumbfounded for a while, suddenly seemed to have an idea and grabbed me with tremendous force. How long have you been watching me? Hiring a detective, I can't believe it. Taking advantage of being in a private room, my husband raised his voice. He deliberately made a loud noise by slamming the album on the table. But I didn't flinch. I'm going to call the person who took this video now, so let's talk, the three of us. Saying this, I made a phone call to a certain person. Don't be ridiculous. What are you planning to do by calling such a person? Are you enjoying cornering me? As he grew increasingly irritated, I calmly hung up the phone and waited for that moment to come. Everything will be clear now. A few seconds later, the door to the private room opened and a woman entered. Dad, it's been a while. Incredibly, it was our daughter, Isabella. Why are you here? You were supposed to be in France. Shocked, my husband almost let slip the biggest secret he had been hiding for 6 months. He immediately made a face that said, "Oh no," and fell silent, but I didn't miss it. That's right. Isabella was supposed to have died in France. Because of you. That's not true. My husband was trembling, holding his head in his hands. Faced with him, our daughter quietly began to speak. I was really surprised then. I never expected to encounter Dad's affair in my study abroad location. Shut up. Be quiet. But when you found out that I had taken that video just now, you were afraid your affair would be exposed. So. Enough already. He tried to silence Isabella several times, interrupting her words, but our daughter didn't stop. You took away my phone and wallet, and deliberately drove me far away in a car and abandoned me. Yes. This was the shocking truth I had heard from my daughter that day in France. The story about Isabella's death was all my husband's lie. I couldn't believe that my husband would do such a thing just to hide his affair. Isabella had set up her phone to automatically save data to the internet in case it was stolen. My husband seemed to think that taking away our daughter's phone would be enough, but I had managed to retrieve all the evidence. Isabella didn't die in an accident. You put her through something terrible. That's a misunderstanding. Right, Isabella? Help me out here. He spread his arms like a father, trying to hug our daughter, but she strongly pushed his hands away. Back then, I begged for help many times, didn't I? Weren't you the one who ignored that? Our daughter said that after that, she walked for days to return to where her study abroad school was, only to find that my husband had already completed her withdrawal procedures and cleared out her dormitory. Isabella, whose French wasn't that good yet, had no close friends or anyone to consult with. Not knowing what to do, she sat dazed in a park until a kind homeless woman helped her, and she managed to survive until meeting me. I can't think of you as my father anymore. I'll never forgive you. Isabella, who had survived the 6 months until reuniting with me with a strong determination to return home, glared sharply at my husband. That's why it's a misunderstanding. If we talk, you'll understand. Are you still going to play innocent? Let's have the police judge whether it's a misunderstanding or not. I'm smarter than you too. I'll escape using any means necessary. His emotions running high, he seemed to have forgotten he was in a restaurant and started yelling and throwing spoons and forks at me. No, with this much clear evidence, it'll be fine. What can you, who've only worked part-time and know nothing of the world, possibly do? Hearing these words, I remembered. The real reason I wanted to support our daughter's study abroad. Every day, being belittled by my husband saying, "What would a housewife like you understand?" I wanted our daughter to see the wider world in my place. I realized I had been projecting my own dreams onto her. Don't underestimate me. I clenched my fist and glared sharply at my husband. As if overwhelmed by this atmosphere, he stopped moving, and at that moment, the sound of police sirens could be heard in the distance. Actually, before calling Isabella into the room, I had asked her to notify the police. Well, it looks like your escort has arrived. Let's continue this conversation at the police station. You're kidding, right? Did you really call the police? Are you trying to make your own husband a criminal? I'm divorcing you, so it doesn't matter what happens to you. Wait a minute. I was wrong. I'll change from now on. So please don't say we're separating. And let's forget about the police. I silently brushed off my husband, who was clinging to me and crying. He then tried to cling to our daughter, but of course, she rejected him. Having given up, he collapsed to his knees on the spot. Afterwards, my husband received a prison sentence for endangering our underage daughter and was fired from his company with disciplinary action. I divorced him and demanded $20,000 in compensation. I also demanded $10,000 from his mistress. Their relationship quickly spread throughout the company, and it seems the mistress found it difficult to stay there. After completing her payment to me, she soon quit the company and left my ex-husband's side. My ex-husband was cut off by his parents and had nowhere to go, and I hear he's now homeless. Isabella returned to her studies in France and began walking towards her dreams again. And I, too, was able to find a new job. Isabella's attitude of trying to see the world with a broad perspective gave me courage. Now I'm busy for myself, but my days are fulfilling.